Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mastering Payroll and Payments Transformation, Change Management for Business Success. I'm Steve Hodson with Payroll.org, and I'm glad you're here. The material you're about to experience is copyrighted by federal copyright law. So that means no portion of this webinar may be recorded, transcribed, or reproduced by any means without prior written permission from Payroll.org. I have just a couple housekeeping items before we begin. During this webinar, to ask a question, please place your question in the studio Q&A panel, and that's located under the video panel. You can type your question here and then click New Question, and it will appear in the queue for us. If you have any technical issues, please place those in the Studio Q&A panel as well. Now, you can resize or close panels on your device as you desire. Hover over the corner, there'll be an arrow, and you can make those adjustments. Then use the brown icons on the left to open up any panels you may have closed or restore your display to its original state. And most importantly for the polls, be sure to turn off the pop-up blocker in your browser to be able to answer the polls. Now, the slide handouts are available by clicking the Handouts tab, and there are other resources available as well. It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Stephen Goldberg, HR tech influencer, analyst, and advisor. And joining Steve is Yael Jose, Director, Product Management of Papaya Global. We're so great to have you. We're so happy to have you here in today's session. First, Steve's going to get us kicked off with the agenda.
Thanks so much, Steve H. And thanks everybody for joining. Let's go over the flow a bit here. So organizational agility, for better or worse, and I consider it for better, my kind of personal brand and repertoire, if you will, when I give talks at conferences. More often than not, it's on the organizational agility topic. So I'm really thrilled to be doing this with Yael for Papaya. So why is organizational agility more important than ever? We'll get into this more deeply, but we're talking about, we know internal and external operating environments are more fluid than ever. There's a lot more uncertainty. What were the drivers of this? Perhaps it started at this level of unpredictability and fluidity and uncertainty. Perhaps it started at the beginning of COVID. Then you had people working from home, working from the office. And then right after that, you had this unprecedented period of innovation going on. Of course, a lot of it relating to AI. So it has really put organizations in a position where it's a business imperative to be highly agile. And when we're talking about agility, we're talking about the ability to pivot strategically, operationally, technologically, be out in front of both business risk and business opportunity. That's at the macro level. At the micro level, at the employee level, we're really talking about adaptability, resilience, et cetera. So again, we'll get more into this. How businesses are modernizing. So essentially, this talk it has a dual theme. The dual themes are organizational agility and really the two sides of a coin, organizational agility and change management. And we're talking about relating that to one particular scenario, and that is modernizing the back office infrastructure as it relates to workforce management and the employee experience. The integration of payroll and workforce tools, we'll get real specific about that with some actionable insights. Trends impacting global payments. One of the main trends that Yael and I will both emphasize is the coming together of payroll and payments at a global scale. Successful change management, what are some tips? Happy to discuss that. Overcoming barriers to change, part of the same conversation. And frameworks to ensure successful project management. My colleague Yael will get into some of that with me as well. And I think we have a poll question.
We sure do, Steve. Here's the first poll question today. What are the top 3 barriers to implement a new back office workforce infrastructure project at your company? Now, choose from the barriers below, and we're asking you to select 3, please. Is it A, unclear ROI, return on investment? B, complex project management? C, fear of potential job loss? Or D, technical integration issues? Now, Steve, I know I can just hear our group now. Some might be saying, well, it's all of the above. You're expecting me to just pick 3? And yes, that's what we expect. That's what we're hoping. The top 3 barriers. I do understand sometimes it can be difficult to choose. Now, Steve and I can see the preliminary results, and we're so glad for the responses that have come in already. We'll be
Yeah.
closing the poll in just a few seconds. So go ahead and make your responses. These are great results so far, Steve. Right now, what we can see, there are 3 winners, if you will, the 3 top barriers. So in just a few seconds, I'll advance. There we go. We can now see, everyone can see the results. Steve, any surprises here?
Well, I would say not shocking level surprises, but technical integration issues. I think we can expect that. Why? Because particularly as it relates to HR, workforce management, we all know, and all the industry analyst firms and research firms are telling us on a weekly basis that there's more workforce systems, people systems than ever. 8 or 10 years ago, the average mid to large size organization might have had 6 to 8 workforce related or people systems. Now the average is more like 20 or more. And we're not talking about complete end to end systems. We're talking about platforms and tools, and the whole infrastructure can be 20 or more. So technical integration issues, I think, is typically the order of the day when there's an IT meeting that relates to supporting workforce management. And you can see the others here as well. So let's move on. Thank you all. A lot of responses there. We appreciate it. Okay, so Harvard Business Review. This is not unique or an outlier in terms of a finding, right? More than a third of large organizations are undergoing a transformation at any given time. And significant percentage of CEOs report their companies have undertaken 2 or more of these. The operative word here is major change effort, which is kind of synonymous with the transformation. There's all kinds of change programs that don't reach the transformation level, I guess, as kind of a lens to use as the distinction between a change program and a transformation. Transformation is very multidimensional, right? It's people, process, it's technology, it might be culture, it might be a partnership ecosystem. There's a lot of components to a transformation. And as you can see, most organizations are going through 1 or 2 every 5 years. And I'm not going to hog the talk here because Yael has quite a few interesting things to say. I'm just kind of kicking it off here with the context around organizational change management, organizational agility. Again, 2 sides of the same coin. So being an employer of choice, kind of the standard thumbnail definition here is the ability to attract and retain top talent. But there's dependencies here. And one of them is having an efficient, modernized back office infrastructure. So as I said before, this talk has two themes that we are kind of interrelating, right? One is organizational agility and change management, the two sides of the coin, and relating that to one particular scenario, which is the mission of modernizing and upgrading, elevating your back office infrastructure, and very specifically as it relates to payroll and payments. And that's where Yael will get into some real operational details. We have another poll question, though.
They come up quickly, don't they? So our
They
second poll
do.
question is, what is your biggest challenge in managing your global payroll and payments? And here are your choices. Facilitating cross-border payments, managing different payment systems for different work segments and locations, maintaining compliance with contractor payment regulations, or centralization and visibility into your entire workforce's payments. And as some of you already did for the first poll, if you're unable to respond to the poll in the slides panel, there can be many reasons for that. Simply enter the letter of your answer in the group chat. That's fine. That's certainly acceptable. That's why we put the letters there, so you don't have to type the whole response. So it's taking a little bit longer for the results to come. Whoops. Looks like someone has already closed the poll. Sorry about that.
Oh, sorry about that.
um,
Sorry.
well,
Can I
we can
go
see the
back?
results now. Yeah. Let's go back and see if it will reactivate the poll. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Let's see. I'm not sure if it gives people the ability to respond. People are responding in the chat, and that's great. Oh, and I see. Interestingly, there are several in the chat commenting they're not involved in global payroll either yet or right now. It's just US, so they're here to learn. That's
Yes.
great. So no, it doesn't look like our response is growing. Oh, yes, they are. Good.
Oh,
Good.
good.
So, yep, there we go. Okay.
Okay, we're gonna go. We're gonna go forward, as they
Yeah,
say.
let's go forward. Let's comment on the results. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting because the one on the bottom 2 minutes ago was in the lead, and now it's number two at 37%, right? Managing different payment systems for different work segments and locations. As someone that, as an industry analyst, I do hear about this quite often. I was just at here in the States, HR Unleash. It's one of the major HR events here. A lot of HR leaders, and this came up in almost every session related to payroll, managing not just payroll, but the adjacent area of payments. And particularly when there's different payment systems, different payment channels, you might have currency fluctuation issues and so forth that Yael is going to get into. But right now, it's almost a tie between 2 and 4. And 4 being, again, centralization and visibility into your entire workforce's payments. I consider that part of the bigger picture of centralization and visibility into everything related to the workforce. But what does the workforce and what does the typical employee care about more than anything? Other than their career, their payments. So let's go forward. Thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to turn it over to Yael now, and she's been very patient and she has a lot to say. Over to you, Yael.
Yes, thank you, Steve. So Steve talked about the elevation of organization agility. But in order to have this agility, when we are talking about the processes of payroll, which we know that is very complicated process, takes a lot of time and a lot of effort in our organization must have good foundations. This is why we've already started seeing a lot of companies investing in integration between the payroll system and the other workforce platform, whether we talk about HR system, payment system, and even analytics. Now, there are 4 main drivers to those integration, which drive those integration between the systems. The first one is cost reduction. When we have the payroll system and the workforce system as different system, that requires a lot of duplicate processes, a lot of inefficiencies in the way that our organization teams work. Integration solves this. Integration cuts those operational costs significantly. It reduces the manual work, it allows automations between on the processes, it simplifies the workflows, and even, of course, as part of it, reduces the amount of error that caused by doing this as separate systems. Next is compliance. We know that compliance is a huge concern for all companies that are doing global workforce. This is a significant aspect that all organizations want to make sure when they are doing a global business, they want to make sure that everything that they are doing is compliant. Those integrations make sure that everything is consistent across the system. Make sure that they reduce also the risk of compliances. Next is the data aspect. We know that when we have integration between those systems, we want to have a consolidated, aggregated, a single view that will allow us to see everything on a one single view, starting from the process itself, starting from the payroll to the payment itself, and as well as cross the workforce, the entire workforce, regarding where you are hiring, in which location in the world. You want to have everything in a single view, aggregated, which will allow the organization to have better decision process and will allow him a strong workforce organization with the ability to grow even more globally. Next, the last and not the least one, is the employee expectation. When we hire globally, we expect to have a unified experience for all our workers. Our employees expect to have transparency, visibility into the process, access to the data, speed of payment, flexibility in the way that we are being paid. Companies have to invest in this in order to create the best experience, the best in the unified experience for our employees, regardless where they are in the world. When companies invest in this, it's actually not just make their employee more satisfied, but it also creates a great reputation for them as an employer for going wider and expanding their workforce globally. So we talked about the 4 drivers for the integrations. And now I want to talk about the trends that we are seeing in the industry that drive those payment transformation. What's fueling this in the market is that we have few trends and a lot of new technologies that reshape how companies think about payroll, starting looking of how they can improve and change it. The first trend that we are seeing is how HR is no longer a back office matter. It's becoming not just an operational matter, but also a strategic aspect, a strategic differentiator, which directly influences of the employee experience and his satisfaction. We want to make sure that when we pay the global workforce, our worker will get the money on time. We want it accurate. We want the visibility. We want the flexibility in payment. This and all of this, of course, and one most important thing is compliance. Everything should have and keep a compliance in head. This is why payroll and payment are becoming not just a back office, but a mission critical task in the organization. Steve, I believe you have thought about the second point.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so AI is ubiquitous and omnipresent, to throw a couple of words at you. Everybody's hearing about AI all the time, 24/7. But we have to keep one thing in mind. AI is not the strategic outcome. AI is one of the means to strategic outcomes. And when we talk about strategic outcomes, when I talk about strategic outcomes that relate to the overall business, it's elevating organizational agility, improving employee productivity. Why? Because modest upticks in productivity, you could do the math yourself. If it's a 500 employee company or a 1,000 employee, you go from 100K revenue per employee to 105K, it's millions of dollars is the result. So modest upticks in productivity, elevating organizational agility. And the third one is what we already covered, being an employer of choice so you can attract and retain. AI helps in all those contexts and many more. It could personalize the learning experience, the career path, career growth experience. It could provide prescriptive guidance, even in the form or the channel of an AI bot or assistant can provide now some degree of prescriptive guidance. But AI is the means, not the outcome. Yael, I think you wanted to talk about fintech and HR tech and the intersection.
Yes, definitely. So the next trend is the rising of the collaboration between the fintech and the HR tech. This actually, this combination, the way that they are combined, creates new possibilities for the global payroll. HR is no longer just an operational aspect. It's now bring the financial operation and and everything that comes with it. This evolution kind of break the line between the fintech and the HR, driving to a unified platform, having everything together. I think we saw in the poll that a lot of you talked about the payment itself, and we are looking into combining those together to have a unified global platform that will actually cover the payroll and the payment as one continuous, seamless flow that will standardize the process from start to end, from the payroll to the payment. And not just that, but also have this as a unified process across all the different locations that you actually hire as a global organization. This is a significant aspect. And of course, and I want to emphasize again, that all of this in those unified platforms is important to make sure that also comply with the local regulation, with the compliance, and make sure that everything is as expected. Other than that, to add one more thing to this combination between the system is that it will allow the visibility of every step in the process. Once you have it as a unified, the data will be there, everything in one place to see all the steps in the process, and it will be very easy to manage. And by that, we'll also be able to control, and from that, even to grow more globally.
Well,
Steve,
yeah, you talked
about
about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I wanted to pass the last point to you.
Thanks. You know, of course, you've been talking about some real compelling benefits, and as we've said already, one of the kind of critical path items to account for is OCM, organizational change management. And we'll get into this a little bit more. Again, it's one of the two themes here. We're relating two themes, OCM and agility. We're relating it to upgrading the back office infrastructure so that you have the foundation for change. But I'll just say one little kind of nugget here. It's a reality, and we're all aware of it. It's that our brains, the neuroscience of change tells us our brains do not like change. Right? They are kind of wired to conserve energy. Change requires a lot of energy from the brain, right? So our brains are wired to conserve energy. They interpret change typically as a threat, and they thrive in a situation where there's predictability. And that's why, in my opinion, it's one of the major reasons why change is difficult. But Yael told you about what's at the end of the journey. And there seem to be some pretty compelling benefits there. Okay. Kickstarting the business transformation project. All right. So why are we doing it? Why are we doing any business transformation project? The why is really important, an important part of the communications plan, right? And it's not just why, but it's why now. And it's why now in relation to why should we think that we're going to succeed now? Because previous efforts maybe came up short. So why is a big part of the communications plan. And there's other kind of more nuances that where I can give another tip. For example, one of the change programs that I ran globally years ago for an investment bank, initially the communications were harping on the benefits, Everybody should rejoice in the benefits, and we were more or less minimizing the perception of giving up some time to learn the new system, the perception of uncertainty, how does this affect my role in my career, etc. So we kind of shifted gears midstream in that particular change program, and we moved to emphasizing the net benefits. When you emphasize the net benefits, you're acknowledging that employees might perceive job risk. They might perceive they're going to have to spend X number of time getting trained in something. So emphasizing the net benefits is important. And by the way, change management, we know the front end of change management is assessing readiness for change, which has a skills component and attitudinal component. What else is going on in the organization? These are all components of assessing readiness, right? So we talked about everything here except for training for success. And I would say that's preceded by visualizing success. And training for success, as Yael mentioned before, you should have KPIs, you should have stages and phases, and measure success along each way. And the end of the change management process, which some would argue never ends, is sustaining the change. And sustaining the change requires going back and reinforcing why, because some of the people that were there at the beginning are no longer there. You need that constant thread of here's why we're doing it, here's how we benefit as an organization, here's how we benefit as individuals. Okay. Yeah, it's a startling stat, either underperforming or failing. That's the outcome of a lot of change programs. I kind of already got into some of the causal factors: inadequate attention to effective communications, inadequate attention to assessing change readiness in a very objective, systematic way, lack of emotional intelligence on the part of management, all levels of management. They're not reading the tea leaves. They're not picking up on signals and cues that maybe the organization isn't totally ready. We have to go back and recalibrate a couple of things, right? And again, in terms of people having, let's say, less of a clear understanding of how their career is going to unfold, that's part of emotional intelligence. And the good story, that could be a good news story too, because there's many more options now in terms of career pivots. You might have a career pivot that's even more satisfying. But let's realize that unless you build in all of these kind of nuggets and concepts and communication points to emphasize, your organization might fall into this category of underperforming or failing at the change effort. All right. So next, we have another poll, my friend Steve.
All right, great. It's our last poll question of our presentation today. Which considerations are most important to you when upgrading workforce payments? Now, this time you can select more than one. And if all apply, you can select all of them this time. So thank you. Your choices are A, unified process, B, global coverage, C, banking integration, or D, data visibility. So these are your choices. Responses are coming in very quickly. That's great. We'll be sure to leave this poll open. So we make sure everyone has a chance to respond. We really do appreciate your responses. And someone put in the chat, I see all of the above. That's great. So thank you for that feedback. We do have more important information to come. So just pausing now for this poll. Excuse me. We're just curious, which considerations are most important to you when upgrading workforce payments. I see responses are still coming in. We'll close the poll in just a few seconds. Oh, Katrina, I see in the chat you cannot see the poll. There can be a number of reasons for that. If your pop-up blocker is on in your browser, you have to turn that off. If you're on a mobile device, and I should have mentioned this earlier, if you're participating through a tablet or a smartphone, on those devices, the polls often appear behind the main screen. And so you'd have to explore your device for that. But otherwise, the question is, which considerations are most important to you when upgrading workforce payments? And the choices are A, unified process, B, global coverage, C, banking integration, or D, data visibility. All right, well, looks like the poll results have slowed down. So let's show the results for everybody. And here are the results. Are either of you surprised?
Well, I'll tell you, it's
Mm-hmm.
the number one unified process certainly reinforces what you've been talking about, Yael.
Exactly. That's exactly what I had in mind. But I also see that the data visibility and the banking integration is also very high. And I think that's also one of the unified process, unified platform that I've talked about. And I will elaborate even more in the next slide. So those are interesting results in the poll. Thank you for that, and let's move on and talk about each one of those in a little bit more details. So Steve talked about the failure points, and I want to focus more on technology, as we said, a unified platform, as a way to address at least part of those pain points and how those technology can help the organization and support them in the process to make it more successful, to support this process, this difficult process of changing. So a few consideration when you upgrade to a workforce payment. The first one is unified process, and we did so in the poll as well, that all of you are thinking this is one of the leading ones. And I agree with you. We want to have a unified a process that will be the same across all the different locations around the world, regardless of where you hire the workers. You want to have both for the internal teams to have a unified process, so it will be very efficient. We want to have the integration that we've talked about, that will have everything in the ecosystem will connect, so it will be seamless, it will be one unified, it will be very simple. And both for the unified process for the worker themselves to have a great experience, but it will be unified regardless of where they are around the world. Those will also allow us to scale those processes, those unified processes, unified platform, if possible, will help you scale your organization globally. The next one is a global coverage. I saw that in the poll it was the smallest one, but when you have a global workforce, you do want to align and you do want to provide, as part of the experience for the worker, the ability to pay in multiple currencies. You want the ability to pay in the different countries where the worker is. I think this is a baseline for providing, for having a global workforce around the world. The next one talk about banking integration. Now, when we are talking about payment, which is very significant, Steve mentioned it as well, right? This is what people care about, other than their career job. They also want to get paid. Then it's very important, not just that we will move the money to the worker, but it's very important, and we want to have it as the payment on time. We want it to be accurate, and we want it to be every time for everyone, right? We want it to be seamless. So those technologies, those integrated, those unified platform will allow to have this as a unified platform, and will provide those capabilities as part of the global platform. Integration, as we talked about, is also very critical here, because it will allow the payment to be a smooth process with the payroll, right? We don't need to connect to different systems to pay differently in different world, and then we need to make connection with multiple financial payment system. In the unified platform, you will have everything integrated together from one end to the other, supporting all the different location, all the different workforce around the world with all the different currencies and countries and so on. And the last one is data and visibility, which also get a lot of answers in the poll itself. And I agree, this is also something very important. We want to be able to have the transparency to see everything combined together in a single place, all the data, both for the entire process. We said payroll, we said payment. We want everything, all the steps in the process to be part of the reporting and the analytics that the organization have. We want to have all the workforce in one platform, so we will be able to have a full and clear view of our entire workforce, our entire payment of the workforce, not just what we have, but also what we pay. And this will be a very strong tool for the organization to make decision and to be able to scale globally, to have information, to make decision. This is one of the most important things today, data, data, data. So we've seen that upgrading to workforce payment is very strategic move that can impact the business, and only by managing it and thinking about those considerations will make sure that the company, that your company will be able to keep and manage the workforce globally and also continue to scale up. And now I'm going to move to Steve to talk a little bit about the framework to work.
Yeah, thanks, Yael. So before I talk about, this is kind of an adjusted framework, that one that's been around for decades, is ready, willing, and able. I've kind of tweaked it to ready, willing, and acceptance. So I'll come back to it in a second, but I want to kind of double click on something both Yael and I have talked about here. And, we mentioned being an employer of choice to be able to attract and retain top talent. We've talked about an employee experience, but let's kind of operationalize or define what we mean by a superior employee experience. I developed a framework some years back. What is a superior employee experience? It had 4 or 5 pillars to it. I won't get into the whole thing, but certainly at a foundational level, employees want to feel valued. They want to do meaningful work. They want to be productive. The second point of my employee experience framework relates more to our talk here, and that is that an employee should perceive that their needs, interests, and goals are being accounted for, not once a year or year round. And again, payroll, getting paid fairly, getting paid on time, getting paid accurately is definitely right at the heart of needs, interests, and goals, right? So some of the themes we've been talking about here all kind of relate and intersect, right? Employee experience, employer of choice, and certainly the kind of use case that we've been talking about is this combining of payroll and payments on a global scale through the right optimized, modernized back office workforce infrastructure. This organizational change management, as you can see the words, ready is basically, I understand why we're doing this, why we're moving to a unified payroll back office infrastructure. I understand why we're doing it, particularly because we have employees in many different countries, and we don't want one set of employees in this region to feel like they're being treated a little less, let's say, fairly, or not given enough attention as employees in another region. And it's the unified platform that allows you to avoid that situation. So readiness, yes, we understand why we're doing it. Willing is, we understand there may be some takeaways, some giveaways, like it's going to take me a few days to get adjusted to new process, new technology, new responsibilities that I may have if I'm in HR, or I'm out of HR and I have some new responsibilities relative, in the finance department. I may have some new job duties. So ready is I understand why we're doing it at the top level. Willing is I understand that there's net benefits that are compelling. So I'll deal with some of the, let's say minor takeaways, givebacks, even if they're just kind of perceived and minor. Acceptance is we really want to plow in and embrace the change. We view it as a way for us as individuals, not just the organization is going to be on a better path, we will be on a better path as individuals. So just wanted to kind of put that lens out there as a framework. And I think, let's see, we're at the 40-minute mark, and I think we have time for a bunch of questions.
Well, Steve, before we get to the questions, just want to thank you and Yael for providing this important information. And I see we have some QR codes on the screen with your contact information. And so we encourage everyone to reach out to our speakers today. And before we move into the Q&A, this is your last chance for your final comments about today's presentation. Your closing thoughts? Let's start with
Steve,
Yael.
go ahead. Okay, great. So I think it was very interesting to talk and see alongside of our topics that we had in mind, the answers of the audience. I think it was very important for us to get this feedback and to understand how we can help those organizations. I think I really understand the pain and the difficulties in those changes. Steve talked a lot about it. I talked a lot about the solution that I think we might, when we are looking for a solution, what do we need to consider? And I saw a few comments here in the chat as well about the fear or the complexity. And I think we just need to take those consideration and look for the right solution that will give an easier solution that will answer the parts of the integration, for the reduce of cost, for addressing the unification of all the process, both for internal users and for our employees around the world. And I think it's very important to look for the right tool that will provide exactly what your specific organization needs. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks. And I will thank you all as well. I will underscore a couple of things regarding change management. I get to, as an industry analyst, I get to attend vendor events, industry conferences. I've never seen so much emphasis as I've seen in the last year on change, on adaptability. In fact, speaking of adaptability, at this conference I was at 2 weeks ago, a gentleman that I didn't even know walked over to me and said, I have a book I just wrote. It's called The Adaptability Quotient, the AQ. This is how hot and trendy adaptability organization. Again, adaptability is at the micro level, the individual level. Organizational agility, ability to pivot is at the organization level. One distinction I'll draw is adaptability versus resilience. I was at an event a couple of days ago in South Florida where they talked about resilience as one of the main themes of their solution offering, right? And so resilience to me is the ability to bounce back. Adaptability, a little bit different, ability to adjust to new processes, new data requirements, etc. But the whole time focusing on the net benefits. That's what enables you to get through the peaks and valleys of change management. So that's what I wanted to say, and hopefully in the minds of those that have stayed with us here, you've been able to relate the change management organizational agility lens to the upgrading of a back office workforce infrastructure, specifically in regards to paying both the payroll and the payments element on a global scale. So should we take a couple of questions here?
Yes, we do have questions in the queue right now. So the first one is for Yael. How do you recommend measuring ROI on payroll transformation projects beyond simple cost reduction metrics? What do you think?
Okay, great. I think first it's a great question. Of course, the easiest way to start with when we measuring the ROI is looking at the cost reduction, right? We know that we will improve the processes, we will reduce the manual work, we will automate things, we will reduce the error rate. But other than that, there are more significant aspects and ways to measure the ROI. First of them is the compliance. We need to make sure that while we go global and we scale up more globally, we maintain the compliance. We want to be ready for audits. We want to be able to make sure that we don't have legal issues or risk or compliance violation or penalties around this. Other than that, we want, and we talked a lot about it during the presentation, the employee experience. It's very important to verify that our employees are satisfied, that they are getting the money on time, that they are getting the money correctly, accurately, as expected. They have visibility to all the data that they need, and they have less and less issue coming to us with question, with support issue, with errors, mistake of the calculation. And the last, and I want to also emphasize this one as the last point, is the visibility and reporting. We also saw it in the poll. This is something important. If we will not have the visibility, it will make us very difficult to make decisions and grow even bigger globally. So I think it's also a measurement to make sure that if today it takes us a lot of time to collect the data, to create a full picture, then now if we are looking with a change and doing a unification and looking for a bigger solution that will create a unified, it will be very easy to get the data there. And it's also, I think, another means of measurement to the change itself.
Well, thank you for that. The next question, this is for Steve, I believe. In a payroll transformation initiative, what are examples of key missed opportunities that organizations ultimately come to realize afterwards?
Well, thank you for the question. Whoever posed it, I will give a two-part answer. Well, it's actually two different answers. The first is more at the tactical level, and it is really one of the main kind of value streams that we've been talking about here, and that's combining payroll and payments. If you have a bifurcated payroll payments infrastructure, you have a nice, very reliable global payroll platform, but payments is spread across many different channels and means. It's going to be inefficient. It's going to have an adverse impact on employees and the employee experience. And it also has an adverse impact on employee productivity whenever anything is inefficient and bifurcated in terms of infrastructure. So payroll and payments, in my mind, logically go together when we're talking about global scale. The other point I want to make is something that was a personal learning for me. I've been involved over the years when I was on the practitioner side in probably 8 to 10 major change programs. I lived on 3 different continents. And one of the main lessons learned for me had to do with the notion of the entire enterprise owns human capital management. HCM, human capital management, let's define it as leveraging the workforce for competitive advantage, leveraging the talents and the skills of our workforce for competitive advantage. That is not solely the responsibility of HR, which is only 1% of the organization. So when my team rolled out a system and we didn't get the enthusiastic support that we thought, we went out and did some investigation, and we heard line managers say, this is HR's job. HR worries about this. We have our own spreadsheets, etc. And the only way to get them to toss away the spreadsheets and trust the system, leverage the system as a true asset, was to kind of sign up to this notion of everybody owns leveraging people for competitive advantage. And that's one thing we learned kind of midway through one of the change programs I was involved in. Hopefully that all made sense.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next question we have in the queue, and I believe this is for Yael. If you're in your experience, what are the most overlooked aspects of payroll transformation that create implementation challenges? And how can organizations proactively address these blind spots?
Okay, that is a great question. As we said, those transformation brings a lot of challenges, and I think, as I said, it's very important to focus on the challenges and to break them down to address them, so it will be easier. What comes to mind is first the integration. We've talked about having all the ecosystem integrated, consolidated into a one connected flow. I think this is one of the most things that people need to put as, I think, the first place of having a unified process, unified platform that will cover everything, which will also lead me to the second point, which is automation. Those integration will also bring us to the automation. The automation will both create a reduce in the cost and efficiency and less errors. So the automation is very crucial in order to succeed in the transformation, part of the challenges that we have. Along with that, with automation, we can also talk about validation. We have a very complicated process. I think validation in the process to make sure at different points in the process that we have validation, that we have approval process to make sure that we will get, if there are issues, if there are problems, we will catch them on time, and we will be able to solve them before the worker will get paid wrongly or not in time, and so on. Another thing, and I think I mentioned it a few times in the presentation, is the worker experience. I think when we think about the system, then maybe integration, maybe automation comes along with it, but the employee experience is not always in focus. But I think it's very important to put it as a focus as well, to make sure that part of the process addresses the need and the expectation from our employees around the world, to have a good enough process, unified process, visibility, accessibility to data, and so on. And again, the last thing that is a challenge and is very important is compliance. Everything that we are doing global workforce. Compliance is at the top of our concern, and we need to make sure that this aspect is part of what we verify when we choose the platform, when we create this process, that we always keep compliance in our mind.
Which is part of the organizational agility story, because particularly in the US and maybe other parts of the world, the compliance environment is not exactly predictable and linear. There's questions about what's going to change, what's going to stay the same. That's all part of organizational agility. And to be able to be agile, you need that solid foundation that we're talking about in terms of an infrastructure.
Well, thank you. There's one last question. We saw it in the group chat, and we didn't want to lose sight of it. So it came from Sharina. Can you give an example of how AI is the means to strategic outcome? How can we use this tool?
Yeah, I can give plenty of examples, and Yael can as well. So one of the, again, as an analyst, it's incumbent upon me to create frameworks that have some usefulness. One of the frameworks I came up with maybe 5 years ago was the AI in HCM framework. And I looked at hundreds of use cases and it kind of fell into 5 categories: personalize, predict, prescribe, understand, and curate. Let's just focus on understand and curate. Curate AI is now not just going to a couple of sources, it's going to literally any source that's relevant to be able to guide us and answer our questions. Right? So prescribe best actions, best practice based on the combination of AI and a large learning model. The large learning model is what powers AI to be able to guide us and what's the best practice, what's the best course of action. So obviously, those are very strategic outcomes. We're not talking about filling out forms or something very administrative. We're talking about the best course of action in the context of something big, like integrating 2 organizations as the result of an M&A. What's the best course of action? Hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Those are the last questions in the queue. And so once again, I want to thank Steve and Yael for this great information. We've seen great feedback in the group chat. So thank you so much. I have just a few closing comments, and then we will wrap up our time together. I especially want to thank Papaya Global for sponsoring today's webinar and providing Steve and Yael as our speakers today. For our attendees, this was great information, and we know you want to watch this session again. The on-demand recording will be available after the session. You'll receive an email about 24 hours after the webinar concludes so that you can go through this great information again. Now, a resource to view our global payroll magazine full of global news, education opportunities, and much more. You can access this through global.payroll.org. And we want to know what you think about today's session. Your comments are essential to the development and continuing success of Payroll.org's educational offerings. So as soon as the webinar ends, the survey will appear on your screen, and we hope you'll take a few moments to respond. With Payroll.org, you have access to Payroll.org's mobile-friendly e-publication and white papers, which help you overcome the challenges of an increasingly global environment. Look for an email with an announcement linking to the latest issues each month when you subscribe to globalpayroll.org. In addition, you'll have access to all the live and on-demand webinars within the Payroll.org education environment. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, a special thank you to our speakers. This concludes our webinar.